Being able to lift like this was the culmination of more than a decade spent in and around the gym. And being able to win a show like this, pose like this, and look like this was the culmination of a brutal 26-week contest prep. That prep and that win was ultimately built upon that previous foundation in fitness, and along the way I've learned quite a few things. In this video I want to share some of the unexpected life lessons I got out of my time as a competitive bodybuilder. Let's be clear, I'm not exactly the refrigerator of a man that I once was, and this is not a how-to guide or a step-by-step process to gaining muscle. This isn't going to be pro fitness world or pro no pain, no gain, and this kind of mentality. Instead, I'd like to look back on the 3 biggest lessons that I learned during my time as a competitive bodybuilder and spend a little bit of time exploring how you could apply those lessons more broadly outside of the gym. Let's get into it. The first lesson that being a competitive bodybuilder taught me is that you can always quit, but there's also always a cost associated with quitting. When I was prepping for the biggest show that I ever won, Mr. Rocky Mountain, which is the biggest show in about an 8-state region here in Colorado, I was about a month out from the show, and at this point I was eating nothing but fish and green beans 6 times a day. I was doing an hour of cardio a day, working a full-time job as a car salesman, and also lifting with extraordinary intensity every day, or close to every day. I overtrained a lot. I ended up reaching out to my coach on the brink of quitting and just really despairing over how miserable I felt. And I will never forget what he told me. He said, "You can always just quit. Nobody else cares." There was some sort of like internal instinctual reaction to hearing that from him, and I knew in that moment that I absolutely could not afford to quit. I knew at that point that there was actually nothing I wouldn't do to see the rest of this contest prep through. And I look back on that moment more than once a day, every day, for the remainder of the time getting ready for that show. There had been years of sacrifices that ultimately culminated in me winning the first Classic Physique Mr. Rocky Mountain title. I would have lost everything I had put towards achieving that goal had I given up in that moment of discomfort. And when I look back now, that is one of the things I am most proud of in my entire life. Sometimes, frankly, even more than sometimes, I did quit. I quit far more contest preps than I ever followed through on. And not just in bodybuilding. Looking back now, my life is effectively a graveyard, littered with half-completed projects and ideas. But this one time, I didn't quit. I saw it all the way through to the end, no matter how uncomfortable it was, and it taught me so much about how to be resilient in the face of challenge and difficulty and keep showing up even when, frankly, at this point, it just sucks. It also taught me a lot about integrity and keeping true to what I said I would do for myself and applying myself with the most effort that I could muster, even in the face of, at that point, for those who have never dieted to that extreme or bodybuilded, I can't express to you clearly enough, every single movement hurts. Everything requires conscious effort. There is just an immense tax that comes with living life that way and pushing yourself that hard. But there's also a really high reward for seeing it through. The second lesson I learned is that there will always be another mountain to climb. A particularly poignant example of this is known as the post-show blues in the bodybuilding world. And this is after you complete your contest prep and step on stage and the adrenaline of that fades, a lot of people are left feeling defeated no matter what the result of the show was, and lost and a little bit aimless. Now, this is often where people will fail at their reverse diets and gain back every single pound that they lost for the show, plus some weight and interest. They might fall off the fitness bandwagon entirely and say, you know what, I'm done with this, that was too much for too long. Or they might just fall into a deep depression. Potentially even more damaging is a way of remedying this short-term discomfort. They immediately set another goal, another show, something else to strive towards. We'll talk about that in a second. That's what the mountain is gonna be. This doesn't just apply to bodybuilding though. In fact, whenever we accomplish something and we hit this peak, there's supposed to be a corresponding low, a corresponding valley after that peak of the mountain. And where we run into a lot of trouble is when we don't give ourselves enough time to sit in the low of that and recover. Actually take stock of what it is that we did. Take a moment of pride and let the exhaustion settle into our bones and decide, what's next? Overcoming this is not about immediately setting another goal. Overcoming this is about sitting in that feeling and letting it be what it is and recovering. We're meant to experience both sides of that extreme, and far too often in today's world, we're so go, 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 go that we don't ever pause to stop and think, is this actually what I still want to do? Am I ready to climb again? Once you've given that load the space that it needs to naturally fade its way out, you can set your targets towards the next goal that you actually want to accomplish, feeling rested and restored and ready to go. Understanding that there's always going to be another peak to climb can help address some of these post-show lulls, and we're going to talk about how. What I've come to realize, and even though I know it up here, I'm still trying to accept, is that this journey we call life is never ending. No matter how far you've come, no matter how hard you work to achieve a goal, there is never going to be one goal that allows you to arrive at fulfillment. And that doesn't have to be a daunting or disappointing prospect. It can actually be a really exciting one. Knowing that there's always going to be something else, something next, can motivate us and push us forward. It can help inspire us to evolve and change and grow. At the same time, though, it's really important not to put too much stock into any one particular goal, because no matter how big the goal is, and again, no matter how hard you work at it, no matter how perfectly it goes, you're never going to hit a finish line and say, you know what, I'm good, I'm done. There will always be something else, something next. It's human nature to desire progressively more. It's always going to be a higher bar. We're always going to strive for more. And so it's really important, and also a very delicate balance to strike, to recognize that we will always have goals we want to achieve, but we will also never be done setting goals that we want to achieve, and we're never going to hit a point where we're good. Now, this doesn't mean that you can simply skate by and give up or not set future goals. It just means that you need to recognize that no matter what goal you set, you'll never be done. There is always room to grow and always things to strive towards, but they also don't make you who you are. When you recognize that goals are just a game to be played, something that you can use to spice up life and make it a little bit different, you can take them really far and you can enjoy them a lot more. Lastly, competitive bodybuilding taught me to really recognize the significance of little things, of the little building blocks, the little Legos that you accumulate and stack up to build something bigger. Success in this sport, especially at the highest levels, often falls down to just meticulous detail. It could be something as small as a few grains of rice or a few reps that you decided not to follow through with at the gym. Muscle is built and body fat is lost not in a day or even really in weeks. It occurs over months and years. And there's no other way to do it other than just showing up every day and doing the same boring things, sometimes really hard things, over and over and over again. There are no shortcuts, and people talk about steroid use all the time in the bodybuilding community, even though it does happen, and it makes a difference. You can never replace what it takes to just do the work. My coach and good friend says something often that I think about a lot, and that is, move the dirt. That's all you have to do. You just have to show up and move the dirt another foot further than it was the day before. And there's not a lot of complexity in that. There's not a lot of, even frankly, difficulty in that. It just requires showing up and doing the same thing again and again. One of my favorite things about bodybuilding, and actually one of the things I've really struggled with since, is it's so black and white. You either follow your diet to the letter or you don't. You either lift as hard as you can or you don't. You either do your cardio or you don't. There were concrete metrics that you could use on a daily basis every day to know whether or not you had laid the bricks that you needed to finish building your wall, so to speak. You also knew that if you followed that process to the letter, the outcomes would be so much bigger than the sum of its parts. It'd be so much bigger than the meal you ate at that day or the extra rep that you squeezed out. Those things stack, they compound. This lesson extends far beyond bodybuilding. It reminds us to focus on these small little achievements, these small little wins, and celebrate them as we go. Without recognizing these and pausing to revel in them, it's so easy to get caught in that repetitious cycle we described before of setting a goal, achieving a goal, feeling a lack of fulfillment because of the goal, and immediately setting a new one, only to keep continuing to feel disappointed with the thing that you thought you were going to be satisfied by. If you are however, able to step back and recognize that each little thing that you do does compound, it does accumulate and grow into something bigger, you can really learn to derive a lot of satisfaction out of the process, out of the journey, and decouple a little bit from the destination. And that's a trite cliche that we all know, but this is a really practical way of understanding that. As long as we are chasing the peak, and as long as we are not accumulating and appreciating each little thing that we needed to do to get there, the trough at the end of that is always going to feel worse. It's always going to feel fruitless and pointless. And it's going to make it really difficult to want to accomplish much. After I stepped away from bodybuilding, this is actually something I've struggled with really consistently. If you know anything about goal setting, or if you've read Atomic Habits or any of these similar books, you do know that it's actually far more beneficial to build routine-based, process-based goals than it is to set these big outcome-based goals. And especially if you have ADHD like me, and it can be difficult to think about things on the scale of months or years, you really do need to be able to look at just, what am I doing today? What is the next right thought or action that's going to get me where I want to go? So if you can really step back and focus on the kind of person that you want to become, the kind of results that you might want to achieve, and boil those down into these little micro processes and celebrate the micro along the way to the macro, you'll be far more contented and far more inspired to show up on a daily basis. And if you're able to do that, you'll move very quickly through this thing called life towards the things that you want out of it. So there you have it. 3 profound lessons that shaped my journey as a bodybuilder and continue to impact me afterwards. And while I most certainly do not have this figured out, it's something that even as I was writing this script, I really needed to remind myself and recognize the areas that I haven't been applying this. These are valuable tools, they are valuable lessons. You could learn these so many different ways. Bodybuilding just happened to be the way that I got there.